Yeah.
Oh, shucks. Okay.
Do you want to go to 2, I think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, why does it saturate? Stand this side.
No, you keep talking.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just waiting for the answers.
There are 4 bases only.
Yeah.
How many times it will shuffle? There must be some limitations to.
Yeah, exactly. So there are only 4 bases. So there's some limitations to how much they can change. Okay. So now the next question is, at what point you start saturating? So yeah, as she said, it's correct. There are 4 bases. There are only so much that they can change. After a point, whatever you add, it's going to be it's not going to change it further.
Just 1 minute, Kunal. I just wanted to make sure you all understand this this diagram, right? This graph. So what we have done here is, so these are the 2 species today. You've taken a particular gene in those and sequence that at different time periods since divergence, right? Out here, they're identical. A little time later, it shows some amount of divergence. As we go further out, it shows more and more divergence. And eventually it saturates, right? So that it's different time points, okay? Just wanted to make sure people got that.
Yeah. So yeah, as time increases, you expect it sequence to be completely different.
Yeah, but it never attains
But
one.
never attains 1.
Why?
So why answer I think she gave is like there are only 4 bases. So there's only limited amount of changes that they can accumulate. But at what point it accumulates?
Saturates. What point is
Sorry, at what point it saturates? Yeah, actually you are correct. It's 0.75. But why? I mean, what was the thought process that you went through? So let's say that you have let's say that you have a species, and you have, for a particular base you have some character, that is A. Let's say we have A. Okay. So after point A will change to T. Okay. So it's basically the probability. So the probability of A changing to let's say T is 0.25. Okay. Then T changes to G. Okay. So again, probability of changing from T to G is 0.25. Okay. And then it will change to C. So again 0.25. Okay. But after C, it will again have to change in either A, T or G. It can't. There are only 4 bases, right? So after C, whatever it changes to, so basically it saturates. It won't give you any difference after that. So basically these 3 like 0.25, 0.25, 0.25, when you add them up, becomes basically 0.75. Okay. So that's where it saturates at 0.75.
Can I also explain that? That's an interesting way of explaining it.
Yeah,
There's another way of,
Chaitanya told me.
yeah, that's, I've not thought about it that way. So another way of looking at it is, if you have 4, say, balls, each one a different letter, A, T, G, and C. You put it all in a basket. You shut your eyes and then you randomly pick, say, any ball, right? Let's say you get a T. Now you put it back, and then you put your hand back in there. What is the probability that you will get a base other than T? 0.75, right? What is the probability that you'll get T? It's 0.25. Probability of getting something else is 0.75, right? So that is the where it is saturated.
Yeah. So it saturates at 0.75. So,
to add one thing here.
huh.
See the diagram that Praveen drew between S1 and S2,
S1.
and we now know that everything saturates at 0.75. That does not mean that evolution stops at 0.75. S1 and S2 are still diverging from each other. They're getting further and further apart in terms of evolution, just that we cannot estimate that evolution after 0.75. Right?
Yeah.
Because of multiple hits.
Yeah.
Same site, multiple hits are happening, and the earlier changes are being masked.
Are being masked. Yeah. Yeah, that's an important point actually. So they keep accumulating changes. Okay. But we don't see it because of multiple hits. So now, is there any other situation where it actually saturates at any other point, other than 0.75? So do you think is there a possibility that it also accumulates at some other point for certain kind of sequences?
30% or 66%. Like, if it's
Yeah.
a protein coding gene, which is
Yeah.
very crucial, so only the third base is available.
Yeah,
Those two definitely.
it will saturate at a little lower.
It's lower.
Yeah. So in protein coding genes, if you have genes under selection, so it will saturate at a lower point. That is, it will saturate at 0.33 of 0.75. Okay. So because he was saying that the last so protein coding genes, there are three triplets of like 3 codons, 3 bases. So the third base have highest. Third base accumulates more changes, and so basically, if the third base actually saturates, this means that the codon has saturated basically, and that saturation probability is 0.33 of 0.75. Okay. So yeah, so basically to correct for this hidden, and let's say now if you have, if you sample some sequences from this region of like basically they have diverged from the ancestor long time back, and you sampled it here. So what's going to happen is you're not going to see any difference. Okay, you're not going to. Because they're already saturated. So in the UPGMA or the neighbor joining with the distance matrix that we drew, so all of them will have same values. Okay. So which is the 2 taxa that you're going to pick first to start building the tree. So all these issues. So basically at this point, if you pick any taxa, you won't be able to build a phylogeny. So to correct for that, we use nucleotide substitution models or models of sequence evolution. So these models of sequence evolutions has certain assumptions. So this Jukes-Cantor model is the simplest model, and it has certain assumptions. Like it assumes that all the substitutions are equally likely. So a change from A to G or to T or C, so whatever changes that are going to happen are equally likely. Another assumption is that there is no among site rate variation. Like for example, so basically each site is equally likely to undergo substitution. It's recording, right?
No, it's recording. I forgot to change this.
Oh, okay. So each site is equally likely to undergo substitution. So in protein coding genes, like the third position has high rate of substitution as compared to in this case it assumes that all the sites have equal rate of substitution. Again, it assumes equilibrium base frequencies, that is all the bases are at the equal frequencies 0.25. So here let's just say that you have this sequence of all A's, and if the sequence evolves under the assumptions of Jukes-Cantor model, that is all substitutions are equally likely, no among site rate variation, and equilibrium base frequencies. So after a while, what will happen is all the bases will be in equal frequencies. Okay, if this sequence evolves under the assumptions of Jukes-Cantor model. Okay. And so this is basically what the model does. So all substitutions are equally likely. So from a change from A to G, G to A to C, C to A, all of them have the same probability, same likelihood. And so yeah, also it's a reversible model. Again, reversible model is the probability of change from A to G is equal to probability of change from G to A. Okay, so backward probability is also same. So we depict in mathematical terms, it is depicted as Pij, that is probability of change from one particular state I to another state, that is J at a particular time t. Okay. And Pii is the probability of no change, that is basically this. So this A remains A, there is no change in that at a particular time t. So these are the different probabilities of change. So you see all the substitutions have equal probability, Pij, and probability of no change is Pii. So if you plot the time on x-axis, and so the e raised to the power of minus e is the probability of no mutation. Okay. So if you plot the probability of no mutation on y-axis and time, so time could be in millions of years or number of generations. So as the time increases, the probability of no mutation decreases. This means that the probability of mutation increases. So as the time passes, it will accumulate more substitutions, more mutations, like we saw in this example here. And that probability is 1 minus e to the power minus v, where v is product of mutation rate and time. Okay. So you incorporate this in the calculate. So what Jukes-Cantor does is it tries to calculate the true genetic distance using these probabilities and this probability of mutation and no mutation. So I'm not going to go into the mathematics of this because it's, I don't think I understand what they do here. But the idea is that, so you have the probability of no change at time t, that is a base remains same, that is A will always remain A, is that Pii. So there are two ways to get to the same base. So probability of, so the PA, basically how you calculate is the probability of picking any base into probability of picking the same base. Okay. So probability of picking any base is 1, probability of picking the same base is 1 by 4. So you'll get 1 by 4 as the probability of no change. Okay. And the okay, so probability of picking a different base is 3 by 4. So the probability that it does not undergo mutation, so probability of no mutation, e raised to the power of minus v, is basically 3.4 into e raised to the power of minus v. Okay. So now you combine these two equations, so it will give you the probability of no mutation at a given site. Because so 1/4 plus 3/4 is basically 1, and that's how you get the probability of no mutation at e raised to the power of minus v, and where v is a product of mutation rate and time. And now, how do you get to the probability of mutation? So you have probability of change from, so mutation is basically change from one site to another site. So first, again, the probability of picking any base into probability of picking one particular base. Okay, so 1 into 1 by 4 into probability of So that gives you the probability of mutation. Into the probability of mutation. So 1 into 1 by 4 is 1 by 4 into the probability of mutation. Again, so the probability of change from one site to another site is 1 by 4 into 1 minus e to the power minus v. Okay. So this is not really important to keep in mind. So it's just because the Jukes-Cantor model is the simplest model of. So you'll see in the next slides, as the complexity increases, becomes as the model like increasing more and more complex models, these calculation actually becomes more and more complex. So this is the simplest model to understand the basics of how actually the nucleotide substitution models help you correct for the hidden changes. So after all, sorry.
So if you're working with a protein coding gene, then this model is not a good model to use. You suggest that?
So there are different models for protein coding genes also. So there are some models that are specific to protein coding genes that can be used. But in this case, I think it won't. So if you use protein coding genes.
This model isn't that all substitutions are equally likely.
Yeah. So under this assumption, protein coding genes, this model is not good for genes under selection. So for that, you can use other models like HKY or GTR, which actually takes into consideration that different rates for different substitutions, different probabilities for different substitutions. Okay. Okay, so you have this probability of mutation and no mutation.
I just wanted to add that with the protein coding, if you are looking at protein alignments, how many amino acids are there?
22.
22. Okay. 20. So you have a matrix. Here you have a matrix of only 4 bases and 4 bases. There you will have 20. And the Jukes-Cantor equivalent would be, all changes are equally likely from one amino acid to another. Right? So there, in case of protein sequences, there we use a whole different class of models.
So
let me just build up on that.
yeah, so that's for the amino acid sequences. But I think she was asking about the protein coding genes, the nucleotide sequences.
Oh, sorry.
For protein.
Coding genes.
Yeah. So yeah, again, because then it will not be a good fit for that because of the assumptions. So yeah, so after this, there's some lot of calculations, and you get this formula basically, which is the actual distance d is given by this formula, that is 3 by 4 into the natural logarithm of 1 minus 4 by 3 and p. So this p here is your p distance. So you plug in your p distance here in this substitution model, and it will calculate the actual distance for your data set between different taxa. So this is your Jukes-Cantor model of evolution. So this is the most basic model to understand the idea behind the models of sequence evolution. There are models which use. So actually, we know that in reality, the transitions are much more likely to happen than transversions. Okay, like say, transition is basically a change from purines to purines or pyrimidine to pyrimidine. And across this purine and pyrimidine are the transversions. So we know that all substitutions are not equally likely. So here itself, the assumption of the Jukes-Cantor model falls flat. So like in nuclear DNA, the transitions are 2 to 4 times the transversions. And for mitochondrial DNA, they can go as high as 8 to 10 times the transitions. So then there are these different models which take into account this parameter, that is the Kimura 2 parameter model. So what its assumption is that substitutions occur according to 2 probabilities. one for transition and one for transversion. So basically, it takes into account that transitions and transversions have different probability of occurring. So here, so in this case, you see that the probability of transversion is given by alpha, and probability of transition is given by alpha, and probability of transversion is given by beta. Okay. But the other assumptions of this model is same: equal base frequencies and no among side rate variation. It's very similar to the Jukes-Cantor model. Okay. So now there are two parameters here, that is different rates of transitions and transversion. That's why it's called Kimura two-parameter model. So like Jukes-Cantor, that calculation that I showed you, this also has those calculations, and then finally you get this formula with which you can calculate the true genetic distance between taxa. And for this formula, I think you need your the rates of transitions and transversions, the alpha and beta values.
Not rates, just
So sorry, the probabilities, the alpha and beta values.
Instead of p distance is divided is now segregated into alpha and beta.
Alpha and beta, yeah. Sorry, not rates, just the values of alpha and beta. So this is your Kimura two-parameter model. So again, the assumption of Kimura two-parameter model, that is all bases have equal frequencies, is again unrealistic, because if you look at these cytochrome B sequences that we have given you for the practicals, with the mitochondrial cytochrome B sequence, that is 1140 base pair long, if you look at the base composition for different taxa, you will see that all the bases, the composition is very different. Okay, so the expected is over 25, 25, 25, but what we're getting is very different. So again, the equal base frequency assumption is again an unrealistic assumption. So yeah, okay. So there is this another model of sequence evolution, that is F81 or Felsenstein 81. It actually incorporates this unequal base frequencies. Okay. So there are different models that have been proposed. There are, I think, more than like 50 models, or more than 60, yeah, 65 models. So we have just listed a few here. And so as you go down this list, the complexity of model parameters increases. So they basically have more and more parameters that they include. Like Kimura two-parameter, I told you, includes 2 parameters. So the most advanced, or the most advanced, you can say, model is the GTR model. This model, and it corrects for multiple hits. It assumes unequal base frequencies, and all the substitutions have different rates. It gives all the substitutions different rates. So here, so all these substitution you see is different. Okay, so there's the GTR uses 6 parameters. These 6 substitution rates.
Can you please talk something about the karma?
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
Yeah, and you skip the slide or like.
No. There's slide after this. So these different models have different assumptions. Some of them take into consideration among site rate variation. Then, so among site rate variation, so this gamma, what you were saying, right? The gamma correction, it corrects for among site rate variation. So among site rate variation is basically different sites in the sequence have different rate of accumulating changes. They basically evolve different substitution rates. Like in protein coding gene, third position has higher substitution rate than first and then second, and introns in general have higher substitution rates than exons. Okay. So this gamma distribution helps you correct for this among site rate variation. So so this is the So basically gamma distribution, so this alpha value is the shape parameter, the shape of the gamma distribution. So an alpha value, if the alpha value is less than 1, then means that the site have high the data set have high among site rate variation. Okay. And let's say here, like this 0.5, this green line, this is the green line here. So it means that most of the sites have low substitution rate, but there are some sites which have high substitution rate. As opposed to this black curve here, which has alpha 100, which means that most of the sites have equal substitution rates. There is no variation among different sites that can accumulate changes. Okay, and there are these different. These are the two extremes, and there are different shapes that the gamma can take depending on the alpha values. Yeah, Praveen, you would like to add anything to this? Or it was okay. So this is the gamma shape parameter. So I hope you got it. So you must have seen these models in the papers that you have GTR plus G. So this gamma parameter basically corrects for this variation across different sites in accumulating substitutions. So apart from that, you must have also seen GTR plus G plus I, the invariant site. So the invariant sites is basically some of the sites are not variable, or some sites are variable and some sites are not variable. So they are conserved basically. So it takes into account that also. So all these things are depending on your data sets. So whatever data set you give, so thankfully you don't have to calculate all this by hand. You have softwares for this. So depending on whatever data set you give, it will give you the best model, best the gamma parameter, and also the value for I parameter. Okay. So if you change your data set, all these things can change.
So basically, whenever I input my data set, I have to run a base fit model testing. So that will help me to get.
Yeah. So every time you add a few sequences to your data set, you have to run this again.
If the advanced one is the GTR gamma and I. So
Advanced in the sense more complex, like most complex model.
Instead of every time calculating a model, can we directly use the same model like GTR gamma for everything?
Yeah, so actually I think there is some slide here. Yeah, here. So which model to choose? Okay. So it is not like the most complex model is the best, is always the best model for your data. Okay. So because the complex models usually have more better fit to the data, but it also increases the computation time. Okay. So so that's one thing. And because if you need to estimate more parameters, and depending on how big your data is, so the amount of time that is going to take to estimate that many parameters is much more than some other model which has less parameter. Okay. Yeah, but overall, but the thing is that you don't always need the GTR or the most complex model. So in a lot of my data sets, GTR rarely gets picked up as the best model. Mostly it will be HKY or other models. Because these complex models, as I said, it adds more complexity, and it's not always that. So in some cases, I don't even get good results with using GTR. So I have to basically select a model, less complex model.
See, the problem is as you use more and more complex models, the number of parameters go up. Okay, but the amount of data is the same. Right? So the error associated with the parameter estimation goes up because the sample size is the same. right? In fact, sample size will sort of go down in many cases. If you just think of p distance and you can just change this maybe.
Yeah, actually.
Okay, so let's just look at a simple example of p distance, right? So there's species 1, species 2, A, G, G, C, T, A, T. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now, how many differences between them? 2.
3.
3. Where are they?
Second.
Here. Here.
Here, and this one.
Here. So what's the p distance?
0.3.
3 by 10, 0.3. Okay. How many of these changes are transition and how many are transversion? I have no clue. You guys have to figure it out because I have forgotten. Huh? All are transversions. Huh?
No.
One transversion, one is transversion.
Okay. Which one is transversion, alpha or beta?
Alpha is transition.
Transition.
Beta is transversion.
Okay. Transversion is 2, transition is 1. Right? So, what is happening? Kimura 2 parameter model, you have to estimate alpha and beta. 2 parameters from the same amount of data. Whereas Jukes Cantor, only 1 parameter. Right? Now this will be p distance of that, alpha and beta, and this will go into your formula. Right? I mean, crudely speaking.
Yeah.
Right? So first one is, you have this one here. This p distance goes in here so that you get corrected distance. Right? And you get this formula by doing all this gymnastics. That's what Pij, we need to get this formula to eventually get this. Right? So that's where that goes. And then in Kimura 2 parameter model, you have this alpha and beta. And that goes in here to get corrected distance. Right? So, as you can imagine, as you increase the number of parameters, more and more parameters have to be estimated using just the same amount of data. Right? So, it becomes a sampling issue. So your sampling error begins to go up. So your estimate of that parameter value becomes more and more shaky, right? So that can cause problems for the program. So it's better to use simpler model if you can, right? So anyway, that was the point I wanted to make.
But I have one question.
Yeah.
So here we are talking about going into the option of the simpler model, and then where does it comes to play the role of model testing?
Yeah. So what?
The model testing is
What?
making the complex one?
Yeah. So what it does, what most of these programs do, is it starts with the simplest model, calculates the likelihood that that model fits the data. Okay. Then it keeps adding additional parameters and starts to explore more and more complex model. Your fit to the data keeps going up because your likelihood score keeps going up, right? But it reaches a point where the improvement in the likelihood score as you go from a simpler to complex model is not much. It's very marginal. Okay? In fact, it does a statistical test to figure out if the difference in likelihood score between a simpler model and a more complex model, whether it is significant or not. As soon as it hits a point where it realizes that these models are the difference in likelihood score. So let's say this is more complex model, this is simpler model, but the difference LC minus LS is really tiny and it is not significant. It stops and says, you know what? Let's forget the complex model. Let's just use this.
Yeah.
Right? So it's going to go through all this. It will start with Jukes-Cantor. Then it will say Jukes-Cantor plus gamma. That's a different model. That's gamma correction.
Yeah.
Then it will do Jukes-Cantor plus gamma plus percent invariant sites. Right? The likelihood score keeps going up and it is significantly better. So, you know, it just keeps eliminating all of these. Then say at HKY, you know, HKY is, I think 3 parameters, you know, if you go back, yeah.
Sorry.
There it is. That's HKY. Right, now HKY plus G is likelihood score is more than HKY, but it is not significantly different. So then it will say, let's stop at HKY. Okay, so model selection, that's how it happens. Is it here?
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Another thing, for example, when we do a model testing, for example, in case of XML, we just only get one best model. I mean, like, they just only pick one of them. So can I rely on that model? For example, if we
No, RaxML has one problem, that is it likes GTR, right? It cannot take any other
It
model.
doesn't take other models and it does not allow different particles to have different rate variability.
Yeah.
No, so RaxML does take different model. There is the command version of RaxML where you have the facility to add these models.
But again, they do not allow rate variability.
GUI, that they
If
don't
your
do.
one partition has HKY, you cannot
No,
do HKY plus
the
GUI.
GUI version
Yeah.
takes only one model.
GUI
The command version takes multiple
yeah,
models.
multiple, so
Yeah,
it
there.
changes actually.
So you can run model test or one of these other programs to figure out your model or sequence evolution, and then use the command version, or you use this program called IQ-Tree.
IQ
Yeah.
is better.
Anyway, we'll discuss all that later. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you guys got a feel of.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Any other questions?
we'll break for tea now.
Yeah, we'll break for tea.
And then we'll go directly there.
Yeah.